Thank you so much for joining me on my new series, The Key to Happiness is Satisfaction. I'm Dr. Jennifer Guttman, and as a psychologist of more than 30 years, I've seen firsthand how many people feel like they're failing at being happy, which is why I wrote my new book, Beyond Happiness, The 6 Secrets of Lifetime Satisfaction, to encourage people to strive for something sustainable, satisfaction, and why I want to start a satisfaction revolution. For each guest, I ask them questions about what their different experiences are of happiness versus their experiences of satisfaction. Today, I'm very excited to have on my Instagram Live, Dr. Shad Marvasti. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Shad is a Stanford-trained medical doctor and educator, as well as an author and public speaker who I'm sure you've seen on the media. He's focused on how food can be used to prevent, treat, and reverse diseases. He works with healthcare systems to treat the whole person and empower people with the tools to improve their overall well-being without simply using medication or having surgery. Dr. Shad, thank you so much for being on my Instagram Live.
It is my pleasure, Dr. Guttman. Thank you for inviting me.
I wanted to know if we could start by, if you could tell us a little bit about different experiences you've had where you felt happy compared to experiences you've had where you felt satisfied.
Well, I think as you've pointed out, happiness is an emotion, and it's something that can be fleeting, just like sadness. It doesn't stay there, right? It comes and goes. It's like mood, right? When your mood changes, it's not something that you're stuck in if you can kind of wait it out. And you don't want to get overly excited by an emotion, and you also don't want to get overly sad by the emotion. And so my experience is that, oftentimes we can get caught up in a moment of happiness, and it's perfectly fine to enjoy that, but it's very different from satisfaction or contentment, because you don't necessarily have to feel the emotion of happiness in the moment to feel content. And so contentment, I think, is really a state of mind where you are satisfied with where you are and what you're doing, and you've reflected on that, and you've seen that things are moving forward in whatever direction you have decided and you have committed to go. And sometimes that means that you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but overall, the arc is that you're moving closer and closer to your goal. And so you shouldn't get caught up in any momentary changes. It's kind of like the old adage of, not going too high, not going too low in terms of your emotions, and just kind of keeping that middle path, because both happiness and sadness will come and go. But that satisfaction, it's kind of like that slow burning, long flame that will kind of continue to drive you and give you the strength that you need to commit to continued progress in any and all areas of your life.
I love what you said about the middle path, because I talk to people about the middle path all of the time, and that you also described, how contentment is synonymous with satisfaction, and contentment and satisfaction, I think, are the middle path, and that it is, contentment and satisfaction are things that we can create for ourselves, or goals that we can create for ourselves, as opposed to happiness, which is more like a dopamine hit that happens from something that's happening that's dependent in the outside world, like something that's unexpected, for the first snow or a beautiful sunset that gives us that dopamine hit, or a clickbait. And that's a very different experience than just what you were talking about, which is the middle path, and something that is a slower burn. It happens more slowly, but is more within our control, and it can create more of a sense of peace.
Absolutely. I think if you are too focused on that dopamine hit, as you said, whether it's from someone liking something that you've posted on social media, or, getting some kind of treat and like looking forward to one piece, it's not that you shouldn't do things that make you happy, but that can't be your be all end all. I can't just ignore all of the different challenges that I have in my life. I think in the guidance that you give in your book about assumptions, or, not really taking care of yourself, and, not committing to a path, and being able to be a closer, as you point out. I think if you don't do that, and you're just simply rushing from one dopamine hit to the next, right? You're going to lose, and you're just going to get caught up in whatever momentary things are happening. and you're not going to be keeping your eyes on the horizon, right? Like that's one of the first advice you may remember from learning how to drive, right? It's not to just look at what's in front of you, like the first, 5 feet in front of your car, but really have to look at the horizon. And it may not seem intuitive because you're like, well, the first thing I could potentially hit is what's right in front of me. But you actually have to look on the horizon, right? And so you might think momentary happiness from whatever your happiness fix is for that dopamine hit is all you need to look forward to and focus on. But when you do that, you miss the big picture, you miss the path, and you miss the opportunity to cultivate satisfaction and contentment in your life.
You do. You really do. Can you talk about a situation where you recognize that you may have chosen satisfaction over happiness and why that was a better choice for you?
Yeah, and I think that's a difficult one to do. I think one big situation was actually in my training in residency, because I think actually one of the most, unfortunately and sadly, one of the most unhealthy experiences of my life was becoming a medical doctor and going through the process, because the training itself can be a toxic experience. Not only do you have the pressure of gaining a huge body of knowledge, but then you're actually right, on the line, having to care for people, where people's lives in your hands, you're making decisions. And oftentimes you're working 80, 90, 100 plus hours or 30 plus hours in a row. And so you're already sleep deprived, you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed. And you get, very conscious of, kind of, and overwhelmed with what's happening. And you're aware that, oh, these things have a lot of implications, and you may go for that dopamine hit, and so I kind of struggled with that, truthfully, during my intern year, which is the first year of residency. It was very tough. I actually gained 28 pounds during that year from a lot of emotional eating, and that was my dopamine hit of satisfaction. It was like, well, of happiness, not satisfaction, yeah. As you point out, very importantly, it was happiness, right? You perceive it to be satisfied, but it's not. It's just getting that dopamine hit. And I felt like, well, I don't have control over anything else, so I'm just going to control these fries that I'm going to eat, or this tasty meal, and at least I can do that, right? But, after taking a little bit of time off to really reflect on everything, I had to shift my mindset and understand that this was part of the process of being able to get the tools that I needed to then be able to serve others as a medical doctor. And even though it was very difficult, I had to build in the patterns of life in terms of exercise. I had to make decisions, right? As you talked about, to value self-care, to value, myself and being able to care for myself, because otherwise, how can I care for others? Mm-hmm. I had to be decisive about making a decision and then closing out on that decision. And so, in that crisis, I realized that really is something that I have to make a decision. I have to stick with that decision. And then I have to think to myself, well, I thought that I went through a lot to get to this point. I sacrificed a lot. And although it's difficult, and I may not have as many moments of happiness as I'd like, this is a temporary period, and I can be satisfied with the fact that once I'm done with this and I get through this, and hopefully I also continue to do the basics of self-care through it, then I'm going to get to a better place where I can do much more with my life than if I stop this right now. So I think when you're able to, you go through that crisis, you use it as an opportunity to reflect and to think about how, foregoing, right? Because becoming a medical doctor is really all about delayed gratification. Mm-hmm. So it's really about differentiating between the momentary happiness, putting that aside, and then saying, I'm going to focus more on contentment and satisfaction, that I'm moving forward with my goal that I've committed to. I'm going to close out on that goal. And once I did that, I started having a more enjoyable experience in my training, and I started to lose the weight that I'd gained and started to make better decisions. And I think after that, it kind of had a snowball effect. So I think, you can't underestimate the fact that those crises in life can be a great opportunity for growth, and for you to realize the difference between happiness and satisfaction, and to really double down on investing on satisfaction and contentment, and not getting overly attached to just seeking momentary, fleeting happiness.
I'm going to get back to that in a second because I want to talk about how I think so much of that probably contributed to your resilience. Everything that you just said probably contributed to your resilience, but I wanted to ask you first. So you mentioned a bunch of the strategies that are in my book. I talk about active self-reinforcement and self-care, making decisions, facing fears, closing out tasks, reducing people-pleasing behaviors, avoiding assumptions as 6 techniques that help people lead a satisfying life. Of those, you mentioned a bunch that came up in medical school. Which one do you think you were struggling with the most then? Which one do you think you still are struggling with the most? Because one of the things that I find with people is that everybody is struggling with one, some, or all of them, either currently or at different points in their life. I don't think that anybody is exempt. These are very universal issues for people, which is why I think that they are so important for satisfaction.
Absolutely. I think they're really important. I think at I was really struggling with the uh, decision making part and closing part in that point because I think a lot of times you make decisions initially sometimes and then you start down a path and then when you feel like things get tough or difficult, you wonder whether or not you should close out and fulfill that commitment. And so you kind of, and sometimes it's okay, right? Because, you know, you may need to redirect yourself, but that also in itself is a decision in closing, right? So I think that's where it's really important. When you say closing out, being a closer doesn't mean that you have to do something, even though you've suddenly recognized, hey, I don't want to go down that path. I want to go down a different path. Well, then guess what? That's a decision. And then you close out on shifting your direction to a different path, whether it's, you know, changing a relationship that's toxic in your life, whether it's, you know, that's a work one, a professional one, you know, whether it's an unhealthy habit that you want to get rid of, right? Or a mindset that's negative and you want to switch it to positive, you know, and all those things take time. You know, I see patients for, you know, wanting to change their lifestyle and address things like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity. And, you know, those things have taken shape over months or years, right, for many people. And so you can't get just a quick fix where it's going to be over within a couple of days. But if you commit to a path of learning and are just able to continually learn and then redirect yourself and make those conscious decisions, I think that's really where you can get to success. And I found that the power of conscious decision making to be a really important tool that I had to hone in to build that resilience over time. And then recognizing that again, it's not the end of the world when something doesn't work out the way you think, right? And you're not happy about it. It's just an opportunity to redirect. And oftentimes, you know, when one door closes, 3 or 4 other doors that you never imagined open up. But you have to be open to that. And when you're seeking satisfaction and contentment, not just momentary happiness, you will be open to that. And that's really important in terms of your mindset.
Right. So you said it so well in terms of what I'm trying to convey in my book, which is that you gain so much in terms of coping when you have the flexibility of mind to recognize that, okay, I made a decision, but the decision isn't binary. The decision is a guess. And then if the decision isn't working out the way that you had hoped, then you can pivot. But in terms of closing, you're the one that gets to just determine the parameters of what closing means to you. It's not that somebody else says, you have to close this way, although the world operates in such a way that it makes it seem like the parameters are preset for you. But the parameters actually aren't. We do get to set our own parameters and we do get to change the decisions that we make. It's just that the world is set up in a way that makes it seem that it's a lot less loose than it actually is. And if we could be a little bit more relaxed and give ourselves a little bit more liberty to be free with ourselves, then we would realize that coping that, you know, it comes with changing decisions, you know, being a little bit kinder and more compassionate with ourselves can lead to great problem solving and coping. And then resilience, which was going to be my next question, which is that it seems like these things have led you to be more resilient and confident. And maybe you could speak to how a mindset like that has helped you be more confident and resilient.
Yeah, well, I think the mindset, the key part is recognizing that failure is part of the path to success. You know, whether you, you know, I think there's an old adage, you know, attributed to different folks. I think this one I remember from, you know, Confucius, I think, is that, you know, our greatest glory is in not in never falling, but in getting up every time that we fall. And I really think that's the fundamental foundation for resilience, is realizing, you know, kind of being a recovering perfectionist, right? I think that you realize that things aren't going to be perfect from the get-go, but you can strive toward perfect ideals while making many, many mistakes along the way. And in fact, those mistakes are the way for you to achieve perfection, and whatever that is in your way, in your world, right? And what we perceive to be perfect, you know, is not something that may in fact really be perfect, right? And that, I think, goes to your point about making assumptions, right? Because we can make a lot of assumptions about what is perfect. We see things on social media, people portray themselves a certain way, but that's not reality. So I think going back to this idea that, you know, being able to get back up every time you fall, being able to learn from that fall, recognize it as an opportunity, is really, really important. Because when you do that, you recognize that and accept that failure is not only inevitable, but it's actually necessary for you to be able to get the strength that you need to move forward. And if you look at it that way, then you have a very healthy relationship with it. Then you kind of look at it more as everything is an experiment and an adventure. And, you know, sometimes that experiment works, but sometimes it doesn't. That's okay, because you just ruled out a path that wasn't the right one. So you're not going to waste your time there anymore, right? And whatever it is, again, personal, professional relationships, situations, right? Now you know which direction you have to start pivoting away from. And maybe that doesn't end up being the right one either, or maybe it's the right one for a time and then it changes again, right? There's seasons in life, there's cycles in life, right? So that flexibility and ability to learn from mistakes and not catastrophizing when bad things happen, right? Again, going that middle path where you don't get overly excited and just say, oh, well, then everything is done now. I've achieved nirvana and it's over, right? Or, wow, this happened and I'm done and there's nothing else to live for, right? Either extreme is wrong. It's inaccurate, right? It's not real. And so just recognizing that middle path and continuing to learn and looking at every crisis as an opportunity for growth, I think is really important for resilience.
Yeah, and I think that I like what you said about, I mean, I like the language, or I'm a big language person. I love language and vernacular, and I try, like, I like what you said about like a missed experiment, because I try to like, not like, failure is such a funny word, right? I think that failure is like a word we use when we're in school, you know, you pass or fail an exam. And I think that a lot of life is about missed experiments. We try something, it's a guess, and then it was either a guess that worked or it was a missed experiment. I like how you phrased that you know, was enticing to me, because I think that a lot of life is about that. We're making a guess and then it's a missed experiment, or it was an experiment that worked for a time, just like you said, because life is developmental and it may work for a period of time and then it could become a missed experiment, so that you have to pivot and then change it, as opposed to, you know, is it actually failing? I mean, I don't know what about life is, what I'm not sure what failing means in life, because, you know, we're all just trying, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the trying part is really important. I think that, you know, effort is, you know, half of the battle or more than half of the battle, right? And I think that's where we tend to overly worry and make mountains out of molehills before we actually get into it. Oftentimes, you know, people in school or with project deadlines, right? You make a bigger deal out of what it is before you get started. And then once you start and you actually get into it, then you're like, oh, wow, this is something that's manageable. I didn't think that. But in your head, you make it a lot bigger. So I think that's one pitfall to avoid. The other thing is, I think you talk about, you know, committing to self-care. And I think that is more about, also part of self-care is giving yourself the space, right, to be able to pause and reflect, not just keep going all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That's not a failure, right? You regroup, and reflect to live another day, to succeed another day, right? If you're tired, you take a nap or you go for a walk, you refresh, right? You got to look at all those things and not see them as, oh, I'm lazy, or I'm not doing enough, or I'm not running fast enough. No. You're not a hamster on a treadmill, although we create scenarios in our heads and situations that set us up for that. But I think people don't realize how much better life can be if we actually take the time and space that we need. And you actually end up being more effective and efficient, right? They've actually found that in the workplace, right? People, either they do a power nap or they go for a walk. They don't just push through. You're actually a lot more effective, right? Working more effectively in those smart, shorter bursts rather than just kind of, burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said, especially because sometimes I think people can get caught up in the shoulds, especially around words like lazy, which is a word I agree with you. I don't like that word. I don't even know what that word actually means. I joke with clients that say lazy, and I'm like, if it occurs to you to say that you're lazy, then you're not.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
so,
Makes
so I
sense.
think so I think that a lot of that I think is this noise in our heads, like I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, as opposed to quieting the noise and doing exactly what you said, which is maybe it's time to just go for a walk, sit with your thoughts, do nothing, and maybe there's a lot of progress to be made in just taking care of yourself and taking some time to do nothing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I
I
think doing nothing is underrated.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, you're so knowledgeable about health and wellness and so many more things. Can you talk about how you would describe a satisfying health journey and what we can start today to be on a journey for a satisfying health?
Well, I think one of the most simple things you can do is carving out time and space for yourself every day to reflect and simply be. Kind of like that space of doing nothing, but really doing something for yourself. And so that can be a meditative practice, like a breathing exercise. It can be yoga, it can be Tai Chi. All of these have a lot of data behind them in terms of, helping with anxiety, with stress, with insomnia, with muscle aches and pains, right? Joint pains, or, anything that you enjoy, like even reading a book, um, you know, these healthy types of gardening, even just going out to coffee with a friend and having an enjoyable conversation. I think committing to doing something that brings you joy and brings you peace and creating that personal space every day to quiet the noise. I think, especially, these days when we have so many challenges happening around the world, the news can be really, really upsetting and concerning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can get really overwhelmed by that. So, making time for yourself and not just feeling like you have to be a doom scroller and like consumer of all this stuff all the time and you overwhelm yourself. You don't need to be on all the time. It's okay to stop and turn things off and then do something that you enjoy, because when you do that, it gives you the space to then be a bit more thoughtful and reflective and take a perspective about your life that then eventually can be connected with a decision and a commitment for self-care. So when you when you take that time and space, then you're more likely to succeed when you say, well, I want to start an exercise program, or I want to start eating healthier, or I want to go to bed earlier so I can sleep more, or, I want to start this yoga class, or whatever it is you want to do. If you don't carve out the space to have some joy and personal time for yourself, you won't be in the right mindset to accept that and then be able to make the changes in your habits and your behaviors that will last over time. Otherwise, it's just going to be something that you have to like push through. Oh, okay, yeah, I have to do this. I should do this, right? All these shoulds. And you're not going to want to do it because you feel like you're taking ownership. You're making a conscious decision. You're committing to closing out on it, and you're going to move forward on it. And even if you fall short here and there, it's okay because you get back on it and you stay consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And I think that what you said about it being different things is so important, and the variety of options that you gave. I mean, even like for me, being in the car is a great place for me to unwind. And what's interesting is that being in the car can mean two things for me. One, it can mean that I just want to be in the car with be quiet, because then it allows my mind to just like roam creatively, and I'm always curious just where it's going to go, because it's the only time where I have just free mental space and I don't want to listen to anything. I just am curious where my mind goes, and that can be very liberating. Or I can go in the car and it gives me, so singing is a hobby of mine, and it gives me an opportunity to just get in the car and sing in any other place to do
That's
that. And
great.
either one of those activities, I can feel it reduce the cortisol. And I'm usually in the car for, when I drive somewhere, for 30 to 40 minutes. So it gives me 30 to 40 minutes for either one of those things to reduce cortisol, like relax me. And I don't feel like I have to pick one or the other. I know when I get in the car which one it's going to be. So
Absolutely.
I like the variety of options that you gave, because I think that, just like you said, there's no should. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
which one it is. It's whatever's personal and authentic to you.
Yes, it's a personal choice. It's yeah, whatever is personal, authentic to you. That's exactly right.
Yeah. You talk a lot about, that one of the things that I love is that you talk about how genetics does not have to be a predeterminer of health conditions. As somebody that has, a lot of genetic things that had gone on in my family's life, I think that a lot of people make assumptions that if there are genetics in their families and their parents and their grandparents, and that means that they're going to suffer from the same health conditions, and that can be scary. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how to combat some of those assumptions so that people don't feel as afraid.
Absolutely. I think that, what we're learning now in terms of the research that's out there is that our zip code is actually even more important than our genetic code, and how we live our life, where we live, who we connect to, the relationships we have. Um, all of those things actually have a much bigger impact on whether or not we're going to develop diabetes or heart disease or cancer. A lot of things that run in families that people are very concerned about, that are very common chronic conditions, you're just not fated to have those things. These conditions are not slam dunk, like their parents had it, your grandparents had it, you're going to have it, right? The choices, the conscious decisions that you make can literally change the expression of your genes for better or for worse. So the way you can kind of think about your genes is like a light switch, right? You can turn certain genes on or you can turn certain genes off. And healthy habits, activities, um, positive, authentic, meaningful relationships, exercise, eating healthy, doing things to reduce your stress, getting good sleep. All of these things can turn off the genes that cause cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and they can turn on the protective genes that protect you against these conditions. And the opposite, unfortunately, is true too. So I think that double-edged sword in this situation, you're the operator of that light switch. You're the one who can turn those things on and off, and you have that power. So the old paradigm was, well, if you're born with it, it runs in your family, then you're fated, right? By your genes. And so there's not much you can do about it. And so you just kind of have to, suck it up and accept it. The new paradigm is that no, actually, what you do is really going to be determining your fate. What you inherit from your biological parents at birth is only part of the story. The rest of the story is what you choose to write. And I think that's really empowering. I think it's really exciting. It gives you more responsibility, but it also gives you more opportunity to make things happen. And I think it's not just an individual choice, right? Obviously, someone who is living in a food desert and is challenged by socioeconomic and other, factors in their life, right? And the policies that we have that unfortunately make, cheap and unhealthy foods widely available, right? That those challenges are not just an individual challenge. That's a society level policy thing where you're setting up people for failure instead of setting people up for success. So I think we have to take the insights that we have, from the new emerging field of epigenetics, which is basically what I described, above and beyond our genes, how we can change the expression, kind of like software, right? You can upgrade or downgrade software. You have a certain hardware that you get, but then your software is what determines how well you're going to function. If, like, you look at us as an analogy, like a computer, in this situations, I think we have a obligation as a society to make things that are healthy easier for people to access. And individually, we have to educate ourselves on those opportunities and feel empowered. So I really enjoy giving patients hope, telling them that they don't have to just take a medication or get a surgery, that what they do can make a big difference and they can feel better, be healthier, and enjoy their life.
I mean, I agree with you. That's empowering and liberating. And that should help people with the assumptions that they could make, because I do think that so many people believe that it's, a sentence that's been written for them already about their lives. And if they could turn that around, it would, I think, make people feel like they could look at their lives very differently. And also look at, if you think about, vicarious traumatization, and, my parent was 40 years old. What does 40 mean to me? What does 45 mean to me? If my, parent had a heart attack at 45, or my parent, had a quadruple bypass at this age, and, then all of a sudden those ages become very traumatizing for a lot of people. But if you look at it the way you've just described, then all of a sudden it doesn't have to necessarily be as, vicariously traumatizing. That's, I think, really important for people to hear.
Definitely.
So you're on an integrative medicine journey, and you look at the whole person, and in that way you've also been working really hard to improve medical education. I would imagine that that has had an impact on your overall personal satisfaction. The work is so important. Can you talk about how that work has improved your personal satisfaction?
Absolutely. I think, early on when I decided to go into medicine, I started out as a philosophy major, and I studied the history of medicine, and I looked at, alternative medicine, and why is there such a thing as alternative medicine? Why isn't it just medicine, right? If it works and it's safe, right, then everybody should be doing it as part of medicine, as part of healthcare. And, I see, and I did see very early on, even before medical school, an overemphasis on medications and surgery as kind of like the narrow focus of medicine, and also more of a reactive disease management system that's really good at taking care of you when you're sick, and trying to kind of stabilize you and do those heroic life-saving measures, like, for example, when someone has a heart attack or a stroke, but not much on the prevention end, right? That heart attack or stroke is not something that happens overnight. You don't catch a heart attack or catch a stroke like you do a cold, right? Or a virus. It's something that happens. It's the end result of decades of certain patterns of living, right? Whether it be unhealthy eating, whether it be exercise, lack of exercise, or you may have those things down, and you're a smoker, or you're not any of those things, but you have unhealthy, toxic relationships, and you're filled with stress, because psychosocial stress has been shown to be equal to cholesterol level or blood pressure, right, in terms of risk for a heart attack or stroke. And that's something that occurs over time. It's that chronic inflammation. And so you can intervene with that much earlier on. And so the opportunity to redesign medical education, to bring this to the fore as a foundational element for students who are becoming physicians right up front before they even specialize, so they have that mindset that they can empower their patient, they can, through diet and lifestyle, reverse things like type 2 diabetes, like coronary artery disease or heart disease, right? These are things that are not only preventable, but they're also reversible through lifestyle changes, right? Just through taking a whole person approach. And it's very satisfying to see the students getting excited about it, the opportunity to be able to teach this. I just launched a new certificate of distinction program where we have these programs in areas like global health or rural health, I just launched one for our medical school in wellness, integrative medicine, and nutrition. And out of our 120 medical students for the first year class, I had 32 students apply for this. So
That's
what
amazing.
amazing popular, right? Just to see how many students are hungry for this. They want to know about wellness. They want to know about nutrition. They want to take this integrative whole person approach to health. And I'm able to give that to them through connecting them with experts, service learning activities in the community. We do farmers market demonstrations, or we do, talk about food as medicine, local, featuring local farmers. We do service learning activities where you learn about manipulation, different healing modalities like acupuncture, being able to expose them to that early, and then also learning about the value of self-care and wellness. Because if they don't do that for themselves, how can they become good doctors, right? How can they become good doctors if they don't know how to do that for themselves? I think being able to do that early on, for them to take that with them through their training, is a real privilege, which really brings me a great deal of satisfaction.
I think that number is amazing. I mean, that's a huge percentage.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, for the first year, it's a huge percentage. I can't even imagine what the number is going to be next year. It's really good. One of the things that I was thinking about while I was reading everything that you've been doing is that when I was early on in my career, I worked with homeless families, and working with homeless families brought me a tremendous amount of satisfaction. I did it for quite some number of years early in my career. And I know that you also have done amazing work with underserved populations, people that don't have access to health insurance. And I was wondering if, similar to my experience, if you have found that that has had an impact on your personal satisfaction. You've talked about how medical education has had an impact on your personal satisfaction, but I was wondering if working with the underserved populations has also, because that so much resonated with me when I was reading about that for you.
Absolutely. I think when you're able to do something, for someone who has so many challenges in life and really hasn't had opportunities or insights about, about how all these things impact their health, and being able to bring students there. I think the model, that we've employed is a service learning model, right? Where the students aren't just learning from lectures, didactics like in the ivory tower, but actually going to the community, right? Going into food banks, going into community health centers, doing the educational piece, and basically connecting with people who are underserved. We focus on programs like the Double Up Food Bucks program and farmers markets, which is one of the parts of the supplementary nutritional assistance program where people with food stamps can get 2-for-1 benefits by getting fresh produce from farmers markets. And we try to bring that to the attention. And we're, one of the other things we're developing with one of the local community health centers that serves patients from tribal nations, Native American tribal nations. We're developing a food prescription program where we are working with diabetes patients, and we're not only giving them education on what to eat, how to check their blood sugar, and how to use food as medicine, but then we're giving them fresh produce and giving them recipes for how to use it so that they can take it home and then come back in the next week and the next visit, and we can actually apply it directly to their life. We're showing them how that can be delicious, nutritious, and giving them the, that opportunity to do that by giving that produce to them. And this is an emerging kind of food as medicine movement nationally that we're a part of. So yeah, that's amazingly gives a lot of satisfaction, because I think people in these populations, also in these communities, have really culturally rich heritages, that are the diversity, just beauty of the perspectives, that they have, the a lot of values around family, and they're just so grateful for someone to take the time and the interest, that you just feel like you're doing something that's meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so interesting for you to hear you talk about career satisfaction and how, I mean, you're so clearly passionate about it. And I think it's so important for listeners to hear how passionate you are about it, because I really do think that people's vernacular around happiness is that people are supposed to strive for happiness. But when you talk so passionately about everything that you're satisfied about, it is amazing that, I mean, there's no way that you could be happy doing every single thing you're doing every moment of the day. It would be
No.
impossible. But your satisfaction comes through with everything that you've worked on, created, developed, innovated, and that is coming through. And I think that that's so much of the message that I want to give to people, is that that feeling of satisfaction is very powerful, and it can bring about a lot of confidence, self-worth, self-respect, all the things that you exude so much of. And I think that that's why it's so interesting and exciting to listen to you talk about it. And I'm hoping that listeners will get that same experience listening to you talk about it. And you've talked a lot about it from a career perspective, but I would imagine that all of the same, experiences that you get of confidence and resilience and self-worth and all of the feelings of satisfaction that you have that you're getting through your career, that then, flows over to your experiences with your family, with your friends, and that it helps with your personal satisfaction in other areas of your life because you've built up such good personal satisfaction within your passionate, pursuits in your career. Is that true? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's definitely true. I think for me, that took a backseat for a number of years. And so, I wasn't able to prioritize it the way I'd liked until just in the last, 5 years or so. And I think that's where, I was able to get married and really commit to family life. And that's really been enriching in so many other ways that I never would have imagined. And I wish I had done that sooner. I think oftentimes you get caught up in one track and you're very impassioned by that. But recognizing the fact that to have a whole life, you need to have love, and someone to share that life with, someone to be there as part of those struggles, someone at the end of the day to come home to connect with, to grow with, to cry with. And so, what I learned through the challenges in my career, obviously I've brought that to bear in my personal life, but I think you also have to make a conscious decision to make that a priority, to invest in that, right? And maybe for some people that's a strong area, but then their career is not as strong, right? Whatever the case is for you, I think your life will become more well-rounded and your overall satisfaction will improve if you're able to pivot to even making conscious decisions about areas that are not your strong points, and working on kind of developing all of those, so both personally and professionally, because that is really, really important. And then that gives you perspective and also helps you not be overly fixated on the day-to-day ups and downs that may be in your work life or on the other side, right? So that you can kind of get a more even keel middle path for everything, because I think there's a lot of learning that comes from that, and patience and growth. And so that also is another example of, you don't assume that, like, hey, if you haven't been good with like relationships, you're not going to be able to be good. If you make a conscious decision and you decide to close out on that, you will be able to. You have the power to do that. Don't assume that you're not going to be a powerhouse in your career just because you haven't found the right job yet. I've done many different jobs before I kind of settled in on what I'm doing right now. The first 5 years out of my training, I mean, I did things from urgent care to home visits to administrative positions, right? And that's okay, because I was still trying to find, where is my sweet spot? Where is the place that I really enjoy being? So again, every one of those, experiments or missed experiments, right? Like, if this didn't work out, helped redirect you to closer to where you need to be in life. So recognizing that, as long as you have that will to make those conscious decisions, you give yourself the space, you care for yourself, you're patient with yourself, you're not overly critical, and you believe that that path is out there for you, and you just are able to keep trying, you'll get there.
Yeah, that was very well said. And I appreciate you throwing in so many of the techniques that I value
Sure.
so much in terms of satisfaction. So I appreciate that, since it's so important to me and I'm so passionate about it. Do you think that there's anything about your experiences of happiness or satisfaction that I haven't hit on that you think are important for our listeners to be aware of in terms of how you think about it?
We hit on a lot of things that are really important. I think this was just a really great, insightful conversation. And I guess the only other thing I would add, you're never going to get to a spot in life where like everything is done, right? You may look and listen to people who are highly accomplished doing really cool things, and you're like, oh man, I wish I was doing that. They must have a perfect life, right? But that's just not the case. Everybody has their demons, everyone has their challenges, and everyone's struggling on a path of growth and hopefully on a path of self-care and reflection, right? So all of us are there in some way. So taking perspective on the fact that no one knows everyone else's story and trying to be able to kind of be open to that, and also not being overly critical of yourself, and realizing that it's going to be peaks and valleys all the way through. You know, I still have a lot of peaks and valleys that I go through. We all do. And we're going to continue to. That's just the nature of life. And I think when you accept that and you strive for contentment rather than momentary happiness, then you start, then you start getting to a place um, where you can kind of start to really see the horizon and not get overly shaken by the day-to-day ups and downs. So I think that's also really important.
I love that. And because it does put you in the best position to bounce back from adversity with purpose and strength and hope and all of those things. It does. I'm sure that everybody wants to know how they can learn more about all of these wonderful things that you're doing, because your work really is amazing. So can you tell everybody how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. I mean, they through my website, drshad.com. So doctor spelled out SHAD, shad.com. And then I have connections, and on Instagram, we've got at drshad9, which I'm using here. But through my website, drshad.com, you can message me, and you can also connect on all my different social media platforms, and learn and connect from there.
I mean, I know that it was an amazing experience for me to talk to you today. I learned so much from you. Your experiences, your stories were amazing. I'm sure that's true of all of the listeners. I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking to me tonight and taking some of your night out to spend on the Instagram Live with me. So I want to just thank you very much. And
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And thank
do
you
it
for the
again.
reminder. I think this is a good reminder for me too. I think having these discussions every day, and putting this out there is really important, because we all need to be reminded of it, because every day is a different challenge, and some days are more challenging than others. So remembering to keep your eyes on the horizon, which, I think in this situation is really that contentment and satisfaction, is an important reminder. So it really helped remind me today too. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That makes me so happy. Thank you. And if you're looking to learn more about sustainable life satisfaction techniques, or my book, Beyond Happiness, The 6 Secrets of Life Satisfaction, you can find all of that information on my website at guttmanpsychology.com, or on my Instagram at Guttman_psychology. Thank you so much for joining me on the key to happiness satisfaction, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye.